2 days ago, the President of the United States threatened to obliterate Iran's power grid. He posted it in all capitals on Truth Social. Reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, or the United States will obliterate your power plants, starting with the biggest one first. That was Saturday. 48 hours later, the exact window he gave Iran, Donald Trump reversed himself entirely. He announced a 5-day pause on all strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure, citing what he called very good and productive conversations with Tehran. Iran's foreign ministry responded within hours, saying there is no dialogue between Tehran and Washington. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf called Trump's claim fake news designed to manipulate financial and oil markets. Iranian state television ran the headline as a victory. U.S. President backs down following Iran's firm warning. And while every newsroom on earth chased the Trump reversal, one man released a short video statement that should have been the lead story on every network in America. Benjamin Netanyahu looked into the camera on Monday evening and said 5 words that tell you everything about where this war is actually heading. We continue to strike Iran. Not we are evaluating the diplomatic situation. Not we support the president's efforts. We continue to strike Iran. And then he added, we are pounding the missile program and the nuclear program, and we continue to deal heavy blows to Hezbollah. There is more to come. The Israeli Air Force struck more than 50 targets inside Iran overnight Monday into Tuesday. Strikes on southern Lebanon intensified simultaneously. The Israeli military told NPR on Tuesday that it estimates it needs several more weeks of fighting to complete its war objectives. Let those facts sit together for a moment. The country that depends on American weapons, American intelligence, American satellite coverage, and American diplomatic protection at the United Nations just watched its most important ally pump the brakes on the war and responded by stepping on the gas. This is not political commentary. This is not a conspiracy theory. What you are watching unfold right now is the most consequential strategic divergence between the United States and Israel since this alliance began. 2 countries that coordinated over 5,000 strikes together in under 4 weeks are now operating on completely different timelines, with completely different objectives, driven by completely different political survival calculations. And depending on how that divergence plays out over the next several weeks, the consequences reach directly into your gas tank, your grocery bill, your mortgage payment, and the value of every dollar sitting in your retirement account. Because as long as Netanyahu keeps striking, Iran has no reason to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And as long as the strait stays closed, every barrel of oil that does not flow through that 33-kilometer channel adds dollars to the price of everything you buy. So let me walk you through the 4 reasons Netanyahu will keep striking Iran even as Trump looks for the exit. Before we get into those 4 reasons, you need the short version of the last 48 hours because the sequence matters and most coverage scrambles it. On Saturday, March 22nd, Trump posted on Truth Social that Iran had 48 hours to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or the United States would obliterate their power plants. Iran's Revolutionary Guard countered by threatening to hit power plants and desalination facilities across every Gulf state hosting American bases. Bahrain sounded air raid sirens on Monday and told residents to seek shelter. Then Monday morning, Trump reversed course. He announced a 5-day pause on energy infrastructure strikes, citing what he called productive conversations with Tehran about a complete resolution of hostilities. He claimed the 2 sides agreed on major points, including that Iran would stop enriching uranium and reopen the strait. Iran's foreign ministry denied any dialogue. An Axios report identified Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf as the Iranian interlocutor, though Iran denied this as well. Oil crashed nearly 11% on the announcement, and through all of it, Netanyahu released his video. We continue to strike. There is more to come. 2 allies, 2 strategies, 1 war. Here are the 4 reasons that split will not close. Here is what most people miss about the man making decisions in Jerusalem right now. Benjamin Netanyahu has spent 3 decades, not 3 years, not a decade, 3 full decades, trying to convince an American president to join a military campaign against Iran. In 1992, as a member of the Knesset, he warned that Iran would have an independent nuclear capability within 3 to 5 years. He repeated the claim in his 1995 book. In 1996, as a newly elected prime minister, he stood before a joint session of the United States Congress and called Iran the greatest threat to global security. In 2012, he held up a cartoon drawing of a bomb at the United Nations General Assembly, telling the world Iran was months away from crossing the nuclear threshold. Year after year, administration after administration, the answer from Washington was always the same. We share your concern. We will not join your war. Clinton said no. Bush said no. Obama said no. Biden said no. Every single one of them. Trump is the first American president who said yes. Seema Shine, a former Mossad official and Iran specialist, explained the shift in Israeli strategic thinking. For years, she said, Israel and the Mossad worked very hard to know and to delay Iran's nuclear program, never to actually abolish it. Abolition was considered beyond reach without American military participation. And then the dominoes fell. October 7, 2023 changed the political calculus inside Israel at a fundamental level. Israel's retaliation cascaded outward from Gaza to Hezbollah to Iranian proxies across the region. The 12-day war in June 2025 degraded Iran's nuclear facilities, but former military intelligence chief Yossi Kuperwasser confirmed that the damage was incomplete. Iran still held 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium stored in an underground tunnel and had refused in pre-war negotiations to export its stockpiles. Waiting to attack again would only have allowed Iran to rebuild its nuclear and missile capabilities. The strategic logic in Jerusalem was that it was best to strike now. And then Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28, 2026, and Netanyahu received the thing every Israeli security planner had considered impossible: a sustained American military commitment against Iran. On March 19, Netanyahu held a press conference and declared that after 20 days of fighting, Iran could no longer enrich uranium and could no longer manufacture ballistic missiles. Whether that assessment survives independent scrutiny is a separate question. What matters strategically is that Netanyahu believes the window is open to permanently degrade Iran's capacity, and he believes that window is measured in weeks, not months or years. Retired Colonel Miri Eisen, who served in IDF military intelligence, described Netanyahu's endgame clearly. He wants to see the physical threat from Iran's nuclear program, missiles, and regional proxies brought down to an incredibly low level. She called it the culmination of what he has been talking about for many, many years. But the clock is ticking. Netanyahu told Fox News that after the June 2025 strikes, Iran immediately started constructing new underground facilities, sites specifically engineered to be immune to future aerial bombardment. If Israel waited another year, those facilities would be operational and the opportunity to strike them effectively would be gone permanently. The Israeli military's Operations Directorate has already moved into what it calls the second phase of the war, targeting remaining nuclear capabilities, depleting the missile arsenal, and systematically assassinating regime officials. IDF spokesperson Adi Stoller stated the objective with zero ambiguity. The goal is to make sure that Iran will never pose a threat again to the state of Israel. That is not the language of a country looking for a diplomatic off-ramp. That is the language of a country sprinting against a closing door, and the hand reaching for the door handle belongs to Donald Trump. This is the piece that requires the most patience, but once you see it clearly, the entire conflict reorganizes in your head. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu entered Operation Epic Fury with fundamentally different objectives, fundamentally different political pressures, and fundamentally different definitions of what victory looks like. For Trump, strategic analyst Shlomo Brahm at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies explained it plainly. If the war can end in a way where Trump will be perceived as a victor, or at least he can make arguments for why he is the victor, that is sufficient for him. Trump needs a narrative. He does not need a permanent strategic transformation of the Middle East. He needs gas prices to come down before the midterm elections. He needs the Strait of Hormuz reopened so global oil flows resume. He needs a deal, any deal, he can hold up on Truth Social and call a win. Look at the economic pressure forcing that calculus. Brent crude topped $112 per barrel on Friday before Trump's Monday announcement crashed it to around $100. By Tuesday morning, oil was climbing right back above $104 because Israeli strikes continued overnight, Iran denied all negotiations, and the strait remained closed. The average American household burns about 90 gallons of gasoline per month. Gas has climbed nearly 80 cents per gallon since the war started. That is an extra $72 per month landing on families who were already stretched. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's, quantified the scale of the national burden. Every sustained 1-cent increase in the price of a gallon of gasoline increases total national spending on gasoline by nearly $1.4 billion over the course of a year. Multiply 80 cents by that figure and let those numbers land properly. Goldman Sachs raised their probability of a United States recession to 25%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped from its historic 50,000 high on February 6th to approximately 46,560. The S&P 500 shed 2.5% since the war started. Mortgage rates climbed from 5.99% on February 27th to 6.29% by March 12th, a 30 basis point jump in 2 weeks driven by the same inflation expectations that oil prices are feeding. The head of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, stood in front of cameras on Monday and warned that no country will be immune to the effects of this crisis if it continues in this direction. He described the current disruption as worse than the combined oil shocks of 1973 and 1979, a statement worth sitting with because those two crises reshaped the global economy for a generation. Birol confirmed that at least 40 energy facilities across 9 countries have been severely damaged since the war began. That kind of economic destruction has a political address, and that address is the White House. Now look at Netanyahu's calculation, because it points in the exact opposite direction. His political survival depends on the war continuing, not ending. Multiple Israeli analysts have documented this dynamic in detail. Netanyahu was facing potential electoral defeat before February 28th. He carries the political stain of failing to prevent the October 7th attack. His coalition has been using the war as cover to advance controversial domestic legislation, splitting and weakening the Attorney General's powers, gaining greater government control over media, and establishing a politically appointed panel to investigate government failures before October 7th. Opposition leader Yair Lapid accused the coalition of exploiting wartime conditions for political gain, saying they did not care that Israel was at war. Work through that math carefully. Trump absorbs economic damage from the war every single day, through gas prices, through inflation data, through stock market drops, through polling numbers that track consumer anxiety. Netanyahu absorbs political benefit from the war every single day. Through national unity, through delayed elections, through the suppression of domestic opposition, through the legal cover that wartime conditions provide. When two leaders' incentive structures point in opposite directions, their strategies eventually diverge. That divergence became visible to the entire world this week. And it is not a temporary disagreement, it is structural. Pay close attention here because this is where the geopolitics reach directly into your kitchen. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed since March the 2nd. 20% of the world's oil, roughly 20 million barrels per day, used to flow through that 33-kilometer-wide channel every single day. Since the closure, tanker traffic dropped first by 70% and then to near zero. Gulf oil producers, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iraq, Kuwait, collectively lost at least 10 million barrels per day of production capacity because they ran out of storage with nowhere to ship their output. The International Energy Agency called it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Not a warning about a future possibility, a description of what has already happened. That disruption landed squarely on Trump's political base. Gas prices in California cleared $5 per gallon by the second week of March. Diesel headed toward $5 nationally, and diesel fuels the trucks that carry every product to every store in the country. Fertilizer prices at the New Orleans hub spiked 35%, from $475 to $680 per metric ton. And that increase is heading straight for American grocery shelves within 60 days because it lands on farmers during spring planting season. The president of the American Farm Bureau wrote directly to Trump on March 9th, warning that farmers face rapidly rising fuel and fertilizer costs at the worst possible moment in the agricultural calendar. Oxford Economics modeled a scenario where oil averages $140 per barrel for 2 months and concluded it would produce an economic standstill in the United States. Globally, the pressure was even more acute. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi warned citizens of tough days ahead after protests erupted over cooking gas shortages. In the Philippines, a transport federation called a nationwide strike over rising fuel costs for drivers. Trump's 48-hour ultimatum on the Strait was not a show of strength. It was a response to economic pressure that was approaching the point of no political return. And when Iran countered by threatening to destroy desalination plants and power stations across the Gulf, putting drinking water for tens of millions of people directly at risk, Trump had to choose between escalation that could double oil prices overnight or a tactical retreat. He chose the retreat. The 5-day pause followed. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. None of that economic pressure applies to Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel does not import oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Israel's economy is not built on hydrocarbon exports. Israeli gas prices are not an issue on the American midterm ballot. The economic nerve that made Trump flinch is a nerve that Netanyahu simply does not have. Israeli strikes target military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, missile production lines, command bunkers, and regime leadership. None of those targets affect the Strait of Hormuz. Netanyahu can keep hitting Iran's military capacity every single night without touching the economic variable that forced Trump to blink. Israel even struck Iran's South Pars gas field, one of the largest natural gas reserves on Earth, in what Netanyahu confirmed was a unilateral Israeli operation. The United States urged Israel to stop hitting energy targets after the global market reaction. Netanyahu agreed to pause on that specific category. But military targets, nuclear targets, and leadership targets, the categories that define Israel's war objectives, continue at full tempo without interruption. He gave Trump the narrowest possible concession and kept everything else running at maximum speed. Former Israeli National Security Advisor Eyal Hulata captured the anxiety driving Israeli operational tempo right now. After the June 2025 12-day war, Netanyahu addressed the nation and declared a historic victory that would last for decades. 8 months later, he was launching a new operation against the same threat because Iran had already begun rebuilding. The lesson burned itself into Israeli strategic planning. If you do not finish the job completely, Iran rebuilds, and you fight the same war again at higher cost with fewer advantages. The Israeli military estimates it needs several more weeks to complete its current objectives. Those weeks are not arbitrary. They represent the minimum time military planners believe is required to locate, target, and destroy remaining nuclear infrastructure, missile production capacity, and regime command nodes before a ceasefire freezes the battlefield in place. Vice President Vance told reporters, "There is just no way Donald Trump will allow this country to get into a multi-year conflict with no clear end in sight." Netanyahu heard that statement. He is operating inside the constraint it defines, compressing maximum military destruction into whatever weeks remain before Washington forces a stop. The honest assessment here requires being precise about what Israel has not achieved. There is no evidence of a popular uprising inside Iran, despite weeks of sustained bombardment. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has consolidated authority and issued public statements vowing vengeance, even though he was reportedly wounded in the initial strikes. He has not appeared in public, but statements have been issued in his name, and the IRGC command structure continues to function through the decentralized Mosaic defense doctrine that Iran built specifically to survive exactly this kind of campaign. Iran continues launching missiles at Israel, including one that evaded both American and Israeli air defense systems and hit a residential neighborhood in Tel Aviv, damaging apartment buildings and wounding civilians. Another struck near the Dimona nuclear facility, widely believed to house Israel's own nuclear arsenal. Iranian state media frames these strikes as proof that the campaign has not broken Iran's capacity to fight back. And the Israeli defense chief himself acknowledged that Iran continues to pose a threat not only to its neighbors, but potentially to European capitals, given the range of the missiles Tehran has been firing. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert warned bluntly, "Another 2 weeks, we will destroy more military camps and so on and so forth. And then what? Iran will rebuild everything. It will take another 2 years, and we will face the same issue. Maybe we can reach some agreement. The enrichment knowledge accumulated over decades of operation cannot be bombed out of existence. You can destroy centrifuges. You cannot unknow how to run them." Netanyahu heard that logic and rejected it. He is pressing forward because he believes the alternative, stopping now and allowing Iran to recover with its remaining enrichment knowledge and reconstituted infrastructure, carries a greater long-term risk than any cost the continued campaign imposes in the short term. That belief is what is driving Israeli military operations tonight and every night until Trump forces the guns to stop. The divergence between Trump and Netanyahu that became visible this week has a direct and measurable impact on your financial life over the next 6 months. Here is the chain, and it is not complicated once you see the connections. Trump's Monday pause sent Brent crude crashing from $112 to just below $100 per barrel. Markets celebrated. Wall Street rallied. The 3 leading stock indexes all closed up more than 1%, but by Tuesday, oil climbed right back above $104 because Israeli strikes continued through the night. Iran denied negotiations. Fresh fighting broke out between Israel and Iran overnight with missiles landing in both countries, and the Strait of Hormuz remained closed. Goldman Sachs now forecasts Brent averaging $110 through March and April, a 62% increase from the 2025 annual average. If Hormuz flows remain at 5% of normal capacity for 10 weeks, Goldman projects daily Brent prices will likely exceed the 2008 record of $147 per barrel. That is not a worst-case scenario from a fringe analyst. That is Goldman Sachs running standard supply disruption math. Every dollar per barrel flows directly into your daily life through channels you interact with every week. Gas prices at the pump, already up nearly 80 cents and climbing. Diesel costs that determine what trucking companies charge to move every product sitting on every shelf in every store you walk into. Because 70% of freight in America moves by truck and every truck runs on diesel. Fertilizer prices that determine what farmers pay to plant this spring and what you pay for groceries by summer. Already up 35% since the war started. Airline ticket prices that track jet fuel costs, home heating bills, and the inflation expectations that all of these inputs generate, which push bond yields upward and pull mortgage rates higher with them. Rates that have already climbed 30 basis points since February 28th, adding roughly $60 per month to a typical $300,000 mortgage. Anyone carrying a variable rate mortgage or a home equity line of credit is feeling that increase right now without doing anything. The structural problem is straightforward once you lay the pieces side by side. Trump needs a ceasefire to relieve economic pressure. Netanyahu needs continued military operations to finish the mission he has waited 30 years to execute. Iran will not reopen the strait while Israeli bombs keep falling because the strait is Tehran's only remaining leverage against the campaign systematically destroying its military infrastructure. Those 3 positions form a knot that cannot be untied without one side breaking, and right now, none of them are breaking. Do not assume oil prices are coming down soon. Do not assume gas prices have peaked. Do not assume the economic disruption is temporary. The forces pushing prices higher have not resolved, they have intensified. Let me run through this one final time. Reason 1, Netanyahu sees a window that took 30 years to open and he believes it is closing within weeks. He is not stopping. Reason 2, Trump and Netanyahu are fighting different wars with different definitions of victory. Trump needs a deal while Netanyahu needs destruction, and their incentive structures have diverged. Reason 3, the economic pressure that forced Trump to pause, the Strait, oil prices, consumer inflation, does not apply to Israel's military calculus, and Netanyahu gave Trump the narrowest concession while keeping everything else at full speed. Reason 4, Netanyahu believes every day without completing the mission is a day Iran rebuilds, and he is racing against the moment Trump's patience runs out. The gap between these two allies is now the single most important variable determining how long this war lasts, how high energy prices climb, and how deep the economic damage reaches into American households. Not what Iran does next, not what the IRGC decides about the Strait. The variable that matters most is whether Trump can force Netanyahu to stop and whether Netanyahu will comply when that moment arrives. Understanding that dynamic is not a luxury. It is the starting point for every financial decision you will make in the months ahead. Share this with someone you care about, not to alarm them, but because when the two most powerful players in a war start pulling in opposite directions, the people who understand what is happening will navigate what comes next far better than the people still waiting for the evening news to explain it to them. The next video is already in production, and this story is far from over.